Mental fitness allows us to not be deceived by the lies of the world, right? To not be always marketed to not always be convinced that there's something wrong with us. And actually saying, you know what, with courage and fortitude, I can take a step of faith today and lead my family, lead my community, my church, my neighborhood, and solve some of the world's greatest problems in partnership with others. That's what I hope mental fitness does.
Hello and welcome back to the Lightwell Podcast. We are recording this episode in January, and like many of us, keeping our New Year's resolutions, today we go to the gym. But not to talk about physical fitness. Today we go to talk about mental fitness. And to help me do that, we're bringing in my friend Vineet Rajan. He is the CEO and co-founder of Forte. It's an organization focused on mental fitness for ministry and nonprofit leaders. He is fantastically insightful about this. I really look forward to sharing his insights with you. Let's get right into our conversation with Vineet. Well, as promised, thank you so much for joining us, Vineet Rajan. He is the CEO and co-founder of Forte, an organization focused on mental fitness. Thank you so much for joining us today, Vineet.
And thanks a lot, Adam, for having me.
So we will get back to the definition of mental fitness and all that Forte does, but I feel like your personal story leading up to that is materially important to the conversation. And I know this leading into this podcast conversation, a great story in general. So we won't have time to get into everything, but can you tell us kind of what about your background set you up to be leading Forte?
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for having me, Adam. I'm really excited to be here. I grew up in Maryland when I came here to the United States when I was 5, and I was an average kid, blue-collar family, and loved sports. In high school, I wrestled, I played football, I ran track. But as a senior, I was 16, 9/11 happened, and it changed my life like it changed, I think, many Americans' lives. A few weeks thereafter, I found myself talking to a Marine recruiter because I wanted to join the U.S. Marines. Thankfully, even though I didn't have a plan, God had a plan. I ended up getting a full ride to school. That was the only way I was going to go to college because as a blue-collar family, I probably didn't have the funds to go to school. And that's where I met my wife the first term of college. Probably the best outcome anybody could wish for going to university. A few years later, I graduated as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Marines. I spent 11 years as an intel officer. Served in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, Capitol Hill, the Pentagon, and my last position was as an exchange officer to the British government. I say all that because I didn't have a plan as a 16-year-old, and somehow in that process of about 10 years of service, my identity became increasingly about what I was able to do for the country as a Marine officer in all these places that I served. And that's a problem. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I felt like God was calling me out of the Marine Corps, and I didn't know what to do or why he was doing it. But he called me out because he wanted all of me, just not a part of me. And that's true for all of us. But the challenge is, if I'm being honest, is that I had a severe identity crisis because everything I knew since I was 16 was wrapped around being a U.S. Marine. And now here I found myself in Cambridge, England, figuring out what to do with myself with a wife and 2 young kids. Well, how does that lead to Forte and mental fitness? Well, in praying in the woods and asking Jesus what he would have me do now with this new season of life that I found myself, he really kind of conveyed to me it's all about loving people for who we are, not what we do. He loves me because I'm me, not because I'm what I'm able to do for him. He doesn't need me to do a thing. And mental fitness and Forte is really around the idea that we're all worthy of being loved and known for who we are, not what we do, not because of our titles. And that's how I ended up falling into Forte and how I end up falling into mental fitness. We can talk about why mental fitness is so particularly important, either in the Marines or if you're a pastor or a teacher, but that's my quick story.
Man, that is fantastic. So well said. And let me start by saying thank you very much for your service.
Of course.
It means a lot to me. My brother is a career Navy man, and it just means a lot to me that you gave up that much of your life to make sure that we are all safe. So thank you for that. And then also, yes, let's get back then into, okay, that leads you into wanting to take care of the whole person, wanting to make sure people feel known and loved and understood and healthy. But you're using a term mental fitness that isn't universally understood. So help me, for the sake of our listeners, define what is mental fitness within the scope of our understanding of what mental health is.
Yeah, let's start there. Actually, it's a great segue. Let me start with the physical part because I think all of us understand the physical world better than the mental world. So the physical world, we know physical fitness and we know physical therapy. We just talked about some crazy goals that we had in 2025, Adam, you and I, and some crazy goals from the physical fitness perspective in 2026. But we all work out, whether we walk or go do yoga or Pilates or lift weights, because we want to be healthier. We want to be better husbands and wives and fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters. We don't necessarily work out because we're injured. On the other hand, physical therapy is around an acute need, typically around a injury of sorts. So when I was in the Marines, I tore my rotator cuff and I had to go through physical therapy to get my shoulder back into action. It gets me back to baseline zero. In the physical world, we have this kind of idea of therapy and fitness. In the mental health world, we don't really have that parallel. In the mental health world, we have things that are classically available to us, like counseling or therapy, which is really important and critical. But those reactive services are more akin to physical therapy. There is a particular and acute challenge in our life that we are responding to, that we need help in to get to baseline zero again. We don't have the equivalency of fitness for mental fitness. And that's what Forte is designed to do. We want to help people actually proactively, intentionally, regularly work out, if you will, so they're stronger for what the world and life will throw at it. Mental fitness is really the continual interior training of your life, because it's that interior training that helps us be more robust and resilient to make decisions that are maybe spiritual, that might be mental, that might be physical, that might be work-related or personal-related. Mental fitness permeates across every decision that we make. And every single one of us, you and I and all of our listeners here, have a certain level of mental fitness, just like we have a certain level of physical fitness. And it's on all of us to increase our mental fitness intentionally so that we can be best prepared for what the world and life has for us.
That's outstanding. And I think the idea of kind of delineating proactive versus reactive is super important. And I know you would say this, and I of course agree. Counseling and the reactive absolutely are essential. They have their place. They're so good. That proactive piece, normalizing that and finding a place where, especially in the ministry world, people know that they're not alone and that it is normal to go and be proactive about the mental fitness piece. That's probably a huge part of what you guys have to educate on and work on day to day. Is that?
That's 100% accurate. I mean, the reality is, I grew up in the church world. My parents were missionaries, serving the church themselves. I'm on the board of my church know my pastor for 15 years. Love the church. And the reality is that pastors aren't nervous or ashamed or using it as a last resort to go work out, right? I know plenty of pastors who work out regularly. In fact, when I was at Brotherhood Mutual, I met a pastor that did the Murph Challenge every weekend, right? He's kind of crazy, and I loved him for that. And the reality is he's doing that not in a sad way or in a reactive way. He wanted to be the best version of himself, and he did it proactively, right? He didn't wait for bad things to happen. He just did it. However, unfortunately, in the United States in particular, there is this still stigma around counseling and therapy, and there shouldn't be one. Having talked to a therapist after I came back from Iraq and Afghanistan, thank God we have therapists and counselors who are there and trained to help us work through particularly acute challenges that need clinical intervention. But mental fitness is actually for the everyday things of life. If you're married, you know that involves work. If you have kids, you know that they don't listen to you the way you would hope them that they would, right? If you're getting older, like all of us, things aren't going the way you would want them to, even compared to even 5 years ago. All of those natural outcomes of life require mental fitness. They probably don't require mental therapy. And so what we want to do is help every pastor, every teacher, every nonprofit leader to be the version of who God made them to become today with the ups and downs of life. And they don't have to wait on defense for that to get better. They can go on the offense, if you will. So that's really what mental fitness is about. It's this mindset of being proactive, knowing that life will still be hard, and that actually that there are things that we can all do individually and collectively to increase our capacity to be who God made us to become.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I want to dial in on that piece of the common day-to-day things that ministry and nonprofit leaders face that, You might say they're like the lights on the dashboard that say, okay, we got some symptoms here. Let's get under the hood proactively before it becomes critical to react to something. What are those that you guys have been at this for a while. We should talk some about all that Forte has already done, some of the numbers, some of the trends you're seeing, but what are the common things that you guys find yourselves talking to ministry leaders and nonprofit leaders about to keep them mentally fit?
Adam, it's a great question. Uh, I would say that while we are the fastest growing mental fitness provider to the American church and Christian private school and Christian nonprofits, we serve tons of organizations that aren't necessarily Christian. And here's a shocker, maybe to some of our listeners: the things that our Christian ministry leaders and workers struggle or deal with are exactly identical to those who may not be in a Christian organization. Well, because what we're talking about is the human condition. All of us are messy people who long to be loved and known for who we are, not what we do. That is an idiosyncratic to if you're a pastor or not. So the things that we talk to pastors about are the same things that we talk to public school teachers about, which is family. Family is almost always the number one thing we talk to and process with a pastor about. It's their spouse, their kids, might be their elderly parents, but it's fundamentally around relationships. Work doesn't typically get into the conversation till about the third or fourth topic in order, right? So it's things like, hey, when was the last time I dated my wife or my husband? When was the last time I was intentional about being with my daughter or my son? When was the last time that I just actually slept? Because I'm just so exhausted from being always on. Because as you know, if you're in the church world, a pastor's never off. That call, that text, that email starts all over again. And so they're always on. And so they don't get the chance to be, quote unquote, just themselves. We talk about it's okay to be you, to be a human, and to get some sleep, and to eat, and to shower, and to go for a walk and not be productive, not be working on that sermon. These are all the kinds of conversations that we typically talk to pastors in particular about.
Those are really good. Okay, and so let's get into a little bit that background of Forte, like I mentioned. When did you guys start doing the work that you're doing, and how have you kind of grown that, or what data have you seen that's kept you kind of refining this approach toward ministry leaders and nonprofit leaders?
Yeah, we started this in, feels like a million years ago, but it was the fall of 2021. So just to be honest, 2020, I was walking in the woods praying, and I felt like God said, start this company. And I thought it was the craziest idea ever. So I want to be on the record for saying this was not my idea. I don't get the credit. I was just like, okay, I thought this was going to not work out, and I thought it'd be over pretty quickly. Well, we're nearly 5 years deep into this thing, and God continues to open doors that we didn't expect. Um, we started with this idea that actually the world's greatest problems are going to be solved by organizations, not individuals. Cancer, poverty, sharing the gospel, those are primarily going to be executed and delivered through organizations, which is fundamentally people working together on a common problem. We knew at the core of this is before AI came into the stage really at large, that fundamentally what it means to be a human is to be known by other humans. There's nothing greater than another human who knows you. Speak to anyone who's going through a challenging season of life, and they would tell you the same thing. And so we wanted, even though my co-founder and I came from a tech school effectively, we knew that technology was going to be a big part, but at the core thesis was another human who's going to journey alongside another human. So we started in 2021, and we started building the technology and the training around this. I'm going to talk to you about the training really quickly. This idea that we knew that there was an age-old problem, but we needed new solution sets. And while counseling and coaching and therapy and spiritual formation, all of these are amazing things, but each of those individual domains had some shortcomings around what we wanted to deliver in the marketplace. So we created our own training program, created by PhDs and masters from public health from Johns Hopkins or nationally board certified health and wellness coaches, and we brought to bear all of these modalities, and we stripped away some of the baggage, and we try to come up with a new idea, a new delivery mechanism called mental fitness. We built that in 2021 and have been building on that for the last 4 years. Now, the question is how do we know that it works? Because this is really important. Otherwise, you're just doing it for your own sake. Well, since the first day, we've always been collecting information on the efficacy of our service. As I said, I was an intel officer for 11 years, and most of my career, the idea was around understanding what's the actual problem, how do we measure and understand if the interventions that we're doing, maybe in combat, maybe otherwise, are they actually solving or going towards the direction of travel we want? Well, we use that same approach here at Forte. So every single session, a call between a member and their own Forte coach, we ask for anonymized feedback. We've had almost 1,650 data points now over the last 4 years that tell us a couple things. One, 97% of those who participate in Forte's mental fitness programming say they're better off mentally, emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. 97%. 96% say they are more productive at their calling at work because of Forte. We also see that actually relationships get better, that actually their identity gets better, that they respond instead of react, and so many other anecdotal evidence that suggests that actually this is an interior to exterior transformation that encourage us to continue to strive to always get better. We're not done yet. We're just getting started, but we have tens of thousands of members that we've served and thousands upon calls that we provided to help us continue to learn and get better in delivering the service to every single member across the Northern Americas.
Those stats are fantastic. I absolutely feel so encouraged and excited hearing of that rate of improvement or that level of, engagement with what you guys are doing and the way that it's making an impact on people's lives. In fact, I looked at Forte's website and saw that some of the people who posted testimonials posted like name, picture, and location of like who they are and where they're from. To me, if you want to talk about like eliminating the stigma around this, it's saying this is who I am and this is how I engage with Forte and this is the difference that they made. That alone felt really encouraging, the way they just said, yeah, this is who I am and this is how this impacted my organization. That feels really encouraging and really healthy. And so
Yeah.
actually, I want to talk about what the practical like experience is for someone who engages with Forte. So if a ministry leader or a pastor or a nonprofit leader hears this podcast and they say, this sounds like something that I'd love to take a step on, what are they actually going to get themselves into? And what's the duration of time or the frequency of meeting? Like, talk about some of those practicalities.
That's great. So I want to respond really quickly to the previous thing you said is we want to change the discussion around mental health. The idea is that if you ever run into a person who went to a CrossFit gym, they tell you what the workout of the day is. You didn't ask them. They told you anyway, right? Because they're bragging about the idea of doing something tremendously difficult. Okay? If we are proud about our physical fitness, which we should be, how much more about our mental fitness? Because every decision that you and I will make runs on the substrate of our mental fitness. How we show up as husbands and fathers, how we show up as leaders, how we show up as neighbors, all of that is dependent on our level of mental fitness. And we want people bragging about that. We want people to say, you know what? I'm never done. We're never done. And how do we become more empathetic, more thoughtful, more intentional about who we're becoming? Hopefully, Lord willing, one day we can get more and more people bragging about it. So that's hopefully our goal. So now let's talk about the practicalities. Whether you're an 8,000 member organization like we're serving or a 10 member organization, the process is pretty streamlined. The first is every single member of your organization gets access to the mental fitness gym of Forte. And in that first minute, you get an email and you can click on a link that takes you to the iOS or Android version of our application, all built custom in-house here at Forte. In that minute on the application, you tell us some quick questions and answers, and you get matched to your own mental fitness coach, which is a real human trained to do this thing called mental fitness with you. You can, if for whatever reason, switch your coach at that moment or at any time of your journey with Forte. No questions asked and no challenges necessary. You can just switch for any reason. Once you get matched with your coach, you will book your first session. That's what we call a call between you and your own mental fitness coach for 30 minutes. The first session is always 30 minutes. Your coach will always call you. You will never have to remember a number or log into some random web page. They call you at the time that you requested. And in that call, that session, the coach will introduce to you themselves and what Forte and mental fitness is and what mental fitness is not, and then quickly turn it over to you to introduce you, for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story. Our number one goal is to help you start talking out loud, because as soon as you start talking out loud, the things of your interior life start to come out. And everyone has things on the interior life that will inevitably come out. Just as an aside, what I said was, as an intel officer, I was a certified interrogator and I ran espionage for the US government. And the reason I say that is the power of questions, it cannot be overstated, actually. Our coaches are trained in good questioning, non-leading questions that suspend judgment and really put you in the driver's seat. So in that first 30-minute call, you might talk about your marriage life or what career decision you're processing, but really it's up to you. There is nothing off limits in your session with your coach. After that first session, you're in the driver's seat. You can book your follow-on sessions for 30, 45, or 60 minutes. The average session duration over thousands of calls now at Forte is 42.5 minutes. What that tells you is people think they have only 30 minutes to talk about, and then they always go over, right? And so that's the sessions or the part of our service. There's also mental fitness exercises that you can do without your mental fitness coach, like a values quest, understanding what gives you values, what are the top 2 values that drive who you are or who you want to become, and how you can put those values into practice more concretely in your life. Things like a reach out quest, which is the idea that actually we want to get you connected to other humans as fast as possible. How about we help you put a date with your wife or your husband on the calendar, or with calling your mom, or taking your son or your daughter out for that date you keep talking about, but you've never calendared. You being in relationship with other humans is what we're driving towards. So those exercises, including a session with your coach, is what we deliver to every member. Now, we serve organizations, so every member of an organization gets access to mental fitness. And at the end of the first 90 days, we provide anonymized, aggregated data that tell the health and well-being of the staff. Now, I want to be very clear. I mean anonymized. We do not bring up or provide identifiable information to any employer. We've been asked. We have never done it, nor will we ever do it. And the only time we identify any human in particular is on one case. If an employee or a member indicates they're going to harm themselves or harm others, we will contact the employer because we deeply value life. But other than that, everything is de-identified and provided like a public health record. And we talk about things like, hey, what are the things that are important to your employee base, like family or relationships or work stress, etc. Because employers who work with Forte care about their employees, and they know that their employees will not tell them all of the truth. And what Forte can do is help that employer make more empathetic decisions when it comes to their workforce. And we provide that as a data benefit for working with Forte.
Those are all really good things. I want to jump back to that little thing you slid in there about what your role was as an interrogator, and just acknowledge I'm a little bit scared of you in that regard, and glad that I'm on the question asking side of this particular podcast. If you ever have me on your podcast, I will come really ready for anything in that regard. So
Adam,
that
the fact that you and I think you have children like I do, we both know that our kids are walking interrogators.
yes, they
They just
are.
they just ask you why 100 times. Many of the things that we do at Forte is as simple as what kids do with us all the time. They just ask you honest questions. They're not trying to lead you somewhere. They're not trying to get something out of you sometimes, most of the time. They're just curious. And Forte coaches are curious. They're curious about who you are and who you're trying to become. And that's what we train our coaches to do. But yes, the interrogation background certainly helped in making sure that open-ended, non-leading questions is a core part of our training programming.
I love it. That's so good. Yeah, and that's a great analogy to the parenting piece of it, and very relatable. I absolutely, get peppered with questions. Like I'm hosting a post-game press conference after every meal
Right.
for all my children. So yes, I want to talk about that. You talked about anonymized data and anonymized reporting. How does Forte handle the privacy aspect of this? Even though what we're trying to do is normalize mental fitness and give people a safe understanding of like, this is a great thing. You should brag about it. But how do you deal with the sensitivity of folks who want to approach this but don't want everybody to know about it?
Yeah, it's great. We're gonna hopefully encourage you to get everybody to know about it, but you're in the driver's seat when it comes to that. The first, look, it's in our terms of service and terms of agreement. We've had a Fortune 50 publicly traded company ask me to provide identifiable information, and I said no chance, and we were willing to walk away from the contract. We're very serious here. We are not going to trade on our values here. We are not giving identifiable data to any employer, no matter how many times they ask. It's in our terms of a service and agreement, both for the employer and the employee, that it's confidential. And we do provide de-identified public health-like data to the employer. The other things that we do, just to help kind of peel the onion a little bit, is when we launch with a organization, let's say it's a private school of 100 people or a church of 20 people or a huge school district of 8,000 people, all of those employees get invited to the Forte Mental Fitness gym at the same time. But which coaches are matched with them and are available to them are idiosyncratic to that individual, which is to say that no one coach or no handful of coaches will have access to the entirety of the organization. We take the idea of compartmentalization from my intelligence world and we applied it to the software stack here. So Adam might choose whoever as his coach, and Vineet, who works at Brotherhood Mutual in this example, might choose Sally as my coach. Adam and Vineet don't know who each of their coaches are, and the coaches don't know who they're coaching within an organization. So we've decoupled the kind of service offering with the organization and the individual. So we compare that to the average church that we work with that might have the local therapy or counseling offering down the street. They have typically 2 or 3 therapists or counselors who are working with the entirety of your staff. That's, in my opinion, a lot of concentration of a lot of information in one place. We've decoupled that and spread that out with an organization. The second thing that we like to do is to make sure that those reviews that you see on the website, they're anonymized and provided unless the employee individually says, I want my name and all those things to be shared. They have to give us the permission to do that on an identifiable basis. So the employee is at the center of this experience. While we serve the organization, organizations are fundamentally a bunch of humans like you and I working together. And so we are laser focused on serving the human. And if we will not do anything that jeopardizes the human's ability to be taking positive, proactive steps in their own mental fitness. Now, we hope more people brag about it. We already see that happening over the last several years, but that is fundamentally the employee or the member's decision.
That's very good. So the empowerment goes to the user of this program on how and when they would want to share that. And that's a
Correct.
big deal.
100%.
Okay, so that's really good. And we will obviously put Forte's contact information and how people can take next steps with this, but this is not a Forte commercial. You and I are here to talk about just mental fitness as a need and as a topic. So taking Forte off the table for a second, let's just say if a leader listening to this podcast wanted to do something to engage with the mental fitness of their own life or the lives of their team or their staff, what are some tips or first steps that you would encourage generally with engaging with mental fitness?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing I would say, and I think many people are doing this already, probably who are listening to this, there's nothing like spending time with God. Nothing. Right? And so for me, the practice has always been finding a rhythm of life where I spend quiet time and I'm not being productive. The lie of the world is that we're valuable for how productive we are. It's not true. So for your own mental fitness is do something that has nothing to do with how productive you are. For me, that looks like quiet time. Another thing that is really helpful for me is going for a walk with no phone, right? Phones are great, but they contort you in many ways, sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. And the reality is that actually you just being left alone for 15, 20, 30 minutes of your day where you can hear your own breathing, you can be embodied, in my case, walking around, will do so much more for your mental fitness than maybe even reading a mental fitness related book, right? So I think those two things in particular are examples that I would highlight here. The third one is one that we know very well, which is, hey, journaling, which is writing down, which is another way of making explicit the implicit things that are happening in the interior of life, is a great practice to get into. I'm working on my journaling practice. It's not my strongest suit, but I know that it's highly beneficial. So these are three things that all of us can and could do today that has nothing to do with Forte. Forte is not the answer. Forte is just an option of ways to be able to increase your mental fitness.
That's so good. It is a tool in the tool belt of someone who wants to pursue mental fitness. So, okay, thank you for those tips. Those are great. Bringing Forte then back into it. We're not going to talk about specifics on pricing. That's something that people can find out if they go to your website. But for those who approach this on behalf of themselves or their organization, and they need to kind of make sense of the cost, they need to justify the investment. How do you help organizations understand what role this plays in investing in their people?
When I talk to churches, one of my favorite questions to ask, that's why I'm smiling so much, 'cause I love asking this question, which is, what did you spend on your coffee in 2025? I'm on the board of my church. We're an ECFA church. We're Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability Church, which is to say we have to report things and we get an audit and all those stuff. And I know what we spend our money on. As a good steward of tithing dollars, we measure and manage every single dollar as we should. So I always like to ask churches what they spend on their coffee. And I'm going to hurt some feelings on this podcast, but your coffee is burnt and commoditized. It's probably not why people come to your church, right? But if you're not willing to spend the same or if not more money on your people than in your coffee, then we probably shouldn't be having a conversation. This conversation about ROI, return on investment, should be then spent across everywhere we spend money at the church. Everywhere. And so how do you calculate the ROI of your coffee? For me, I can articulate to you the ROI of Forte. So let me do that really quickly. On your P&L, your profit and loss statement, or your financial statements, the number one expense or operating expense in your organization is your people. The number one driver of your mission accomplishment or fulfilling the things that you put in your bylaws and making a profit if you're a for-profit institution is your people, which is to say your people is your highest form of leverage if you're a leader. What are you doing to get the most out of your people? The people that you hired during that interview, how do you keep them coming up every day after day, even though life is hard? It's probably not your coffee. It's probably not that benefit that nobody uses that you're providing. It's probably something that actually helps them feel and be known as a human, particularly in the age of AI. So we measure ROI in three distinct and discrete ways. The first is productivity. The average organization across the United States experiences about 20% in costs in presenteeism. So let's just do some very basic math for a second. If the average pastor or teacher or nonprofit leader makes $50,000 a year unburdened, 20% of that is $10,000, which is to say there's $10,000 of opportunity on average for every employee in your organization. 97% of the population that uses Forte say they're more productive at work. You're already making money on Forte. Let's talk about the second thing. To increase productivity, how do you do that? That's a lagging outcome. What's the leading indicator? Well-being. Well, a person can't be productive if they're not a real person, right? You're not making a machine more productive. You're making a human more productive. Well, what's a human? You got to mentally, emotionally, relationally, and spiritual beings. And so 96% of the population say they're better off in their well-being perspective. That's a Deloitte study that says for a proactive service like ours, there's a 5 times ROI for every dollar you spent in terms of well-being. So we can measure that and manage that. So that's pillar number 2. Pillar number 3 is, hey, is there membership value of going to the gym? Now, we are a gym-like service. This is 2026 January, so people are all thinking about New Year's and going to the gym, and the gym is going to be very busy for the next 60 days probably. If you get a membership to the gym and you never go to the gym, you never step on that treadmill or the elliptical or squat rack or deadlift, is that the gym's fault or is that yours? The reality is it's yours. And same thing with Forte. If you don't use the service that we made super easy for you, convenient and accessible, that's not Forte's problem, right? But here's what we know. We're the number one used benefit at any organization that we work with. So the membership value, the number of the value that people get from using our service is quite high because people use it, their well-being improves, and their productivity then therefore increases. The average customer or partner at Forte gets 3 times their money in the first year in hard costs. I'm not including value like cultural improvement, your ability to actually increase your ability to recruit the right people in your team, the tangential benefit in retention, both in absolute and relative value, and the other things that come with that. I'm talking about hard mathematical costs. So Forte is more than ready to have a conversation about ROI if you're going to be ready to be honest about how you're going to invest your capital.
Hmm. Those are really good points. Those are great pillars. I love those 3 pillars. That's excellent. So one thing we talk about a lot on the Lightwell podcast is risk management, and a lot of that has to do with property or liability insurance. But I think there is certainly a tie into the risk management of your mental health when it comes to mental fitness. How do you see the relationship between what Forte does and general risk management for a ministry or a nonprofit organization?
So, Adam, you may not know this, but I wrote my thesis at Cambridge on terrorism risk assessment.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So I wrote a very boring paper, about 100 pages long, on how do you calculate risk when it comes to terrorists
Wow.
and how do you make that assessment so that you can do the risk management, right? And why is that relevant here? Because organizations are doing risk management all the time, maybe unintentionally, and maybe who are more thoughtful, a little bit more intentionally, right? And let me tell you something, when I talk to churches, they are very aware of the risk that are associated not only with their buildings, but with their people. Because one of the greatest things that churches run off of is the rich history and legacy of a church. The reputational risk of a church is near and dear to every church that we serve, every private school, every nonprofit that we serve. And so they are always thinking about, well, how do we actually steward this reputation as well as we possibly can? What Forte does in the terms of risk management is actually quite simple. In the pre-mental fitness era, if you will, there was only really one option for most employees who are working in ministries, in any organization, quite frankly, is that it has to get so bad that they either get caught or confess, right? But the level of duress has to get so bad that they either get caught or they confess. But by that point, that organization has already paid the presenteeism cost for quite some time,
Right.
and they probably put some things at risk in the organization. Decisions that that individual made to conceal their activities, if you will, that aren't in line with the ethics or the values or the policies of that organization. Well, now mental fitness provides you a pressure release valve way ahead of that problem, right? Because now everyone, Lord willing, is actually processing with their mental fitness coach. And the first thing we need to help people do is to recognize that actually when you're explicitly making statements about yourself, you start to hear the truth for what it actually is, not the voice that you say in your head. And that actually prevents decisions that are adverse to the organization from happening in the first place. Not all, but many of them. Secondly, one of the first things we know about our condition is that we do bad things by ourselves. We do good things together, right? And so the reality is if we're on a track, if Vineet is on a track to do bad things, Adam, who loves me and cares for me, was like, Vineet, dude, you hear what you said? Could you think about this? You think about that? There is wisdom in counsel together. And Forte provides that at scale with somebody who's never going to be an employee at your organization, who's never going to see you at your kid's PTA meeting, who's not going to see you at the grocery store, and who isn't going to judge you. We're not paying your salary. We're not promoting you. We're not demoting you. We're not firing you. And so the reality is that from a risk management perspective, we are giving organizations an off-ramp for people who are dealing with the human condition. Last thing, I'll get off this talk track, but every single human on the face of this planet are 4 Fs: finite, fallible, fragile, and fallen. Every single human. And so I am susceptible to doing terribly wrong things, just like everyone else is. And in the counsel of people who love me and care for me and walking with Jesus, I can mitigate many of those things. Forte is trying to do that at scale for the people who are called to live a life that, quite frankly, is very challenging in today's era. So that's how we do risk management along with our partners.
That's excellent. Now, as we're kind of turning toward the end of our conversation, which has been fantastic, Vineet, thank you so much for your time, your insight, your experience. This is all really, really valuable stuff. You are obviously deeply invested in this world. So this is somewhat your personal vision, but I also just want you to answer, if you can, on behalf of the industry in which you operate, which is, if it were going really well, as the industry of mental fitness grew, what role do you think this plays in organizations in the future?
Yeah. The category of mental fitness is new. The problem isn't new. The solutions that we're talking about in the category is new. And if we're successful, there should be, hopefully, Lord willing, a lot of mental fitness providers, right? That's what we want. We don't want just one car maker. We want 20 car makers. We want 30 cell phone providers. We want, all the things. And so we hope that actually there's a lot of copycats. So what does the outcome look like? Well, I think in the age of AI, we're asking ourselves, what's the value of what it means to be a human? I hope that in the future, humans will work together on problems that God put on their heart to solve together while retaining their humanity, while understanding that actually we're wonderfully made in His image and that we have something unique to contribute right now in this season of life, and that we could do that together under His leadership. And that mental fitness allows us to not be deceived by the lies of the world, right? To not be always marketed to not always be convinced that there's something wrong with us. And actually saying, you know what, with courage and fortitude, I can take a step of faith today, lead my family, lead my community, my church, my neighborhood, and solve some of the world's greatest problems in partnership with others. That's what I hope mental fitness does.
Well, that's a 10. That's a walk-off. You hit that one really well. So I don't want to cut it short. I can ask you more questions, but that was an outstanding summary of where this is now and where you hope it's headed. So let's ask though, if someone's listening to this podcast and they say, I'd love to take a next step, how do they find Forte?
Well, if you check us out on www.getforte.com, GETFORTE.com, you'll find some information about us and who we are, and there's a way to contact us there. Our website is being redone in the next 60 days. I'm excited about that. So you'll see even a fresher look for us there. And you can follow us on LinkedIn and all of our socials and get a hold of us that way as well.
Okay. And we'll make sure and link that in the podcast description, so it's easy for anyone listening or watching to be able to get a hold of that. And so, Vineet, before we wrap up, is there anything that I haven't asked that you thought we'd be talking about today that you're like, this is important to me, I want to make sure I mention it?
Honestly, Adam, I hate to give you a compliment, but I think you did a phenomenal job, my man.
That's what I was fishing for. Yes. That's how we do it on the Lightwell podcast. We're comprehensive. We cover all the bases. No, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and the work that you are doing, the way that you have said yes to this call on your life personally, and now the multiplicative impact across so many thousands of organizations who are more prepared and more fit to stay in the calling they've been called to. So thank you on behalf of them and on behalf of the Lightwell podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Adam, it's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to keeping the conversation going offline.
You got it, man.
All right.
My thanks once again to Vineet Rajan, CEO and co-founder of Forte, for his time today, his insights, his background, just an absolutely excellent conversation with him. I'm so thankful for all of that, and I hope that you found something really useful in that. Like he said, if you want to get started with Forte, you can go to getforte.com and learn more about what they do. Or if you want to learn more about risk management in general for your organization, you can always find us at lightwell.com and find an advisor in your area to get a conversation started there. I hope that you took something from today that's useful and helpful to you. And until the next episode of the podcast, let's go and let it shine.